Joining us now, Scott Taylor, Republican, 2nd District. That's the Virginia Beach, goes up to Williamsburg, the eastern shore of Virginia. He's a Republican. He's also a former Navy SEAL, and he's running for a second term. Scott, good to have you with us.
Good morning, John. Great to be with you and your listeners as always.
Okay, I have to get into Sig-Gate situation, but I want to start, if I may, with John McCain. RIP 81, died over the weekend. There's going to be a big service for him. I've interviewed him many times. He's been on my show. Is always a gentleman to me, very wonderful to me, and super nice to my wife all the time. Any experience with a senator that you might want to relay?
Yeah, I mean, I've met him numerous times, and you have to take politics aside because people agree with him, disagree with him. That's fine, but the reality is he served this country in uniform, and obviously as a senator, and I have nothing but respect for him. He was always kind to me, and he was funny. He's quick-witted and funny, and I wish that side of him shown, when he ran for president in 2008. But there's no question about it that he's made his mark on the fabric of our nation. So nothing but respect. He
had a great sense of humor. He always, when I was around him, he always told one joke or the other, and always made us laugh. Some of them were a little risky. A little off color.
He's a Navy guy.
Back in the day, right? So you got the Navy day. But I remember we were sitting with him one time, and I was in Atlanta, and I had an interview. We were at the same table with him, and we were going for the interview, and he turns to my wife, Ann, and he says, "Can't you interview me instead of him, for heaven's sake?" It's like, give me a break. So he was always a funny guy.
She is a lot more attractive than you are, John.
I know, and he's like, yeah, just have her interview me. She's so much smarter than you are. So it's all good. Okay, let's get to this signature thing, Scott. We have 4 dead people, according to the pilot, 59 fraudulent signatures found on petition filed by your campaign. Let me just ask you this straight out. Why on earth did you get involved in this?
Let me say, I have no idea how those got there, or who did them, or anything like that. You've been in this politics for a long time. It's so easy not to do that with signatures. It's so ridiculous. So, we were in D.C. when this stuff happened, and certainly there are a couple folks on the campaign who should have known better, should have protected us from this not happening, and they are no longer with us. We made quick action once we found out that this was in fact the case, fired them, moving on. And obviously on the other side you have the Dems. Washington Dems are just trying to disenfranchise an African American female again. They already did it in the first place in the primary. They're trying to do it again in the general. When you collect signatures, you don't know who's signing them. There is wrongdoing, of course. If you sign a petition saying that you collected them and you didn't, that's obviously against the law. So, look, I can't comment specifically on details because there's investigation. But the reality is, we're going to cooperate. This doesn't change anything in our campaign. It doesn't change anything in our message. It doesn't change anything in my office. We're moving forward. I don't know why it happened. I think it's pretty stupid because, again, it's so easy not to do this. But there's no question about it that the Democrats are going to try to make this a huge issue, and they're going to try to, number one, they're going to try to disenfranchise Sean Brown and get her off the ballot. Number two, they'll just try to tar me with it. And quite frankly, they've had some help in the media. That being said, I'm not bashing the media. I think it is a story. There's no excuses here. If there's anything wrong in my campaign, we'll take action. As I said, I had to fire 2 people. One of them's a good friend of mine, and it sucks, but that's what you have to do. So, but this doesn't change anything for us. We're moving forward and talking about who we are, what we've done, and what we're going to do.
I think it's difficult to do that until this is addressed. Now, so let me get back to my first question.
Well, I got to tell you, John. Let me comment on that. Was in the district all month and talking to people all over the place. Now, while it's sensationalized and it's in the media and stuff like that, I don't hear about it in the streets. I do not hear about it in the streets. Our numbers are. We had a poll done after all this stuff happened. We have another one because it'd be worst case scenario, if you will, because you've had this negative sort of headline reporting, which you know if there's false signatures on everybody's signatures, right? That's why you get more of them when you turn them in anyway. You have no idea who's signing them unless you did or forged it, and that's obviously illegal, right? So, but the thing is, for us, we had a poll. Our numbers are fantastic. We're not letting up the gas pedal whatsoever. We're in the streets, thousands of homes getting knocked every single week, thousands of people being called. I was there, door knocking and stuff like that. I don't hear anything about this. People look, people understand what it is. People know who I am in my district. They believe in us. That's why we were elected, and that's why we'll get reelected.
Okay, so I get back to this question. Why would you have 4 of your staffers spending 3 days of their time rather than working on promoting?
John, I can't. I know you want to hear all about this, but it's not appropriate for me to go into details. I'm sorry.
All right, can I just ask you this? Were you aware of this strategy?
Yeah, I've already on the record that I was aware of it. Of course, I was never aware of anything that would be illegal, nor would I approve of that ever. Like I said, getting signatures, it's so easy not to screw up, so it makes I'm baffled by the whole thing, quite frankly. But I'm on the record saying that I was aware. Yeah.
So why wouldn't you just have told your staff, look, we're not getting involved in this. Let Sean Brown get her own signatures. Work on my campaign.
John,
I'm trying to get the answer as
to go into details, man. I know what you're trying to get, and that's your job, but that's all I have to say about it.
All right. I'm just going to comment, Scott Taylor. I mean,
Sure.
I think all you have to do is run on your record, which you're doing, which is phenomenal.
And we're going to do that, and that's why we're going to win.
And I would say for anybody in the future, I mean, trying to get signatures for other people. Look, I went through this with Sarvis that was on my show a bunch of times, and when he ran for a libertarian governor in 2013.
Well, that's why it's funny, John. Right? Like it's so hypocritical of Democrats. Number one, you have people who are Democrats who are party officials who, to my benefit, meddled in our primary against Randy Forbes, right? My own opponent meddled in our primary election. Yes, the Sarvis thing, same thing. So it's very hypocritical of Democrats to be like, oh, my God, it's so terrible that someone is helping their opponent or something like that in politics. So, I mean, look, it can smell stinky all at once, but it's very hypocritical for Democrats to be like, oh, my God, he tried to help Sean Brown out. I just think it's like I said, and you follow this all the time, and you report on it, and you try to get to the truth, and that's your job, right? But what I'm telling you is, while they're trying to make this such a fundamental issue in our race, it is not. It's not in our district. It's not at the doors, and it certainly isn't in our numbers.
Well, there is a hypocrisy because I had Robert Sarvis on my show probably 4 or 5 times. I gave him a tremendous earned media exposure for a libertarian candidate because some polls had him at 10%. And when it was said and done, I found out that a Democratic donor and operative funded his signature petition drive to get him on the ballot, and that was backed by the Democrats and Terry McAuliffe. So that really felt squirrely to me. It just didn't feel like it was an honest effort. Basically, when it was all said and done, he would not have qualified for the ballot because getting signatures to get on a state ballot in the Commonwealth of Virginia, as you know, was a very arduous task. Just ask Gingrich 2012 or Rick Perry or anybody else. I mean, it's very difficult to do. So that was funded by Democrats. I also, quite frankly, during your campaign in 2016, I had Sean on my show several times. She's a very nice woman, and I enjoyed my dialogue with her. And she did get screwed out of this. I mean, she never had a shot to be nominated. I mean, she really did get screwed.
They all did. So did Karen Mallard. They just didn't realize it. They didn't realize what was happening, that they were being boxed out and disenfranchised.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't like that.
Right.
Look, whatever party you're in, I have a big problem with Washington coming in and selecting a local nominee. I don't care what party it is. Disenfranchising everybody else and selecting a nominee, I think it's wrong. I think it should be a local choice.
Yeah, well, anyway, just for the record, if a Sean Brown person had knocked on my door, I would have signed her petition.
Me too.
I would have signed it because if it was for her. But I think looking back on this, and I know you can't comment on it, it was just dumb. I mean, I can't even explain it beyond any other word. The whole thing was dumb, and I would advise any other candidate out there in the future, just run your campaign. Don't get yourself on the ballot. Don't worry about other people.
Yeah,
would be, and I think you would probably agree with me on that.
100%.
Let's get to your opponent, Miss Loria. She served in the Navy. What are some of the biggest differences in policy between yourself and Elaine?
There's a stark contrast. Number one, she sent out an email and that she supported and would have been supportive of shutting the American government down over a Clean Dream Act, which had no chance of even going onto the floor, and obviously incredibly irresponsible, especially in our area, which affects military, federal workers, contractors. The National Guard in our state lost over $500,000. There was air traffic control problems with civilian and military airspace in Norfolk. It was highly irresponsible. That's one thing. Number two, she wants to repeal the tax reform, which has been a huge economic boost for our area, for our state. You've probably reported on the hundreds of millions of dollars that are going to state coffers because of tax reform. 9 out of 10 people getting a raise, a bonus in their pockets. Business confidence super high. So she wants to repeal those things. I think that's a pretty stark contrast. She wants Medicare, I think either Medicare for all or Medicare from 50 and up, which would be, obviously under the ACA, they took money from Medicare already, and it's already stressed. And to extend that would need massive tax increases and put Medicare in jeopardy, even though they've read the polls and they look at Medicare and Social Security and they're trying to use that, saying that Republicans, because of tax reform, are going to try to alter their Social Security Medicare, which is completely false. It would be the Democrats trying to do Medicare for all or Medicare down to 50, which would unbelievably stress Medicare, if not make it fail. So there's some pretty big contrast between myself and my opponent.
Let me just ask you about the Mueller investigation. I'm going to just ask you, Scott Taylor, an open-ended question. 1 year into this thing, as of today, with the Cohen plea, the Manafort conviction, now they're giving the Southern District of New York is giving immunity to Trump Organization's CFO. What do you think right now of the Mueller investigation?
Well, it's quite a bit deviated from the reason why it was formed, hasn't it? I mean, it's way off course. If people do things wrong, hold them accountable, man. And I'm for the rule of law, of course. But this, in Manafort course, for example, obviously the guy gets tried. He was convicted by a jury of his peers. He himself said it was a fair trial. However, you have completely unrelated to Russia. You had 17 members of the Mueller investigation, 17 taxpayer dollars paying for 17 people in that trial, which I just think it's deviated off course. There's no question that it is. The president calls it a witch hunt, but it definitely appears as though that's exactly what they're trying to do, is find anything they can find on people around him to try to close in on him. And it's just nothing to do with Russian collusion. So I'd like to see the thing wrapped up. If you got something on that, then put it out there, and move on. So hold people accountable if there are people to be held accountable. But I just think it's really way off course from Russia collusion, which is the premise why it was started in the first place. So I'm certainly troubled by it.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was planning a trip to North Korea to follow up on the dialogue for denuclearization of the peninsula, and President Trump canceled the trip, saying that not enough progress towards denuclearization was being made. Do you think the president did the right thing in canceling it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree with the president, his approach to things like North Korea, where he's not going to give them anything if they're not doing something right, where you had the opposite under the last administration, like, for example, the Iran deal. They'll do anything to get a deal, therefore giving up our position and undermining it. So, I think it's good to have dialogue. I think you haven't seen any missiles shot, rockets been launched. You haven't seen, or you're seeing reunification of families since the first time since the Korean War, the North and the South. There are definitely some changes here, and the president has been very clear that he's just not going to. He's going to remain strong until he sees progress. I think that's a good thing, and quite frankly, when you look at this scenario, and I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to get on a path towards denuclearization. There's no question about it. We've been dealing with it for a couple of decades. Mm-hmm. But when you look at the overall picture, it's not going to be something that happens overnight. Mm-hmm. Like, I know when we report on it and people would attack him for making that decision. I think when you have to look at it in a much broader context. This is going to take place over years, not days.
All right, final question. Congressman, the president has just doubled down on the tariffs against China, another $50 billion. And he basically says, this is a battle that I can't lose because we have $580 billion more of our dollars going to China that's coming to the U.S. Do you think he's on the right path, or do you think maybe it's gotten out of hand?
No, it's funny. In my office, I've gotten a lot of people to request me to sign on these things for tariffs, and I've sort of slightly declined for all of them, because when you look, whether it's hot war, cold war, economic war, there are always unintended consequences. The president will make mistakes potentially or not. Some people will suffer, some people will not. But make no mistake about it, we are in an economic war. We've transferred tons and tons of wealth over to China. And what are they doing with it? Number one, they're cheating, of course. Number two, they're putting that right into their military defense spending, which counteracts us. There's no question their ambitions are to supplant the United States as the world power, right? So what's not talked about on a much bigger level, in my opinion, and what President Trump is trying to do is number one, get the trade imbalance correct. Stop the aggressive ambitions of China to become a regional hegemon and then a world power as well too, with their military defense spending, which directly goes against our weaknesses. That's their whole military plan, basically, to be able to defeat the United States. So listen, I would rather see that trajectory go down via economic ways as opposed to actual conflict. There's a scholar, Graham Allison, he talks about the Thucydides trap, which when he looks at a status quo power and a rising power, and more often than not, they end up in physical conflict, historically speaking. I don't want that. I want the United States to remain the world superpower. I think that we are more benevolent than China. We have a lot more, we believe in freedom a lot more than they do. And to the extent that we can get some of our wealth back, but also reduce their trajectory of military spending, I'm for it. And I've spoken to farmers. I'm a soybean farmer. I know Gino Lowe told me, he said, listen, we're concerned about it, but we also understand what he's trying to do, and we believe in the long term it's going to come out on the end. And when you look at things like soybeans, because China's not dumb, they're like, okay, we're going to sanction the, soybean farmers, which is the president's base. Well, there's a finite amount of soybeans, so China stops getting it from us. They get it from Brazil. Well, who gets it from Brazil? Europe. And then, of course, President Trump went over there and pressured Europe to buy our soybeans. So they have their finger on the pulse. Mm-hmm. And I think overall, while I'm concerned about certain industries and certain things, I support the long-term efforts.
All right, that's it. We're out of time. I want to thank Scott Taylor for being with us. Scott Taylor running for a second term for Congress, 2nd District of Virginia. That's the Virginia Beach area up through the peninsula to Williamsburg, also the Virginia Eastern Shore. More information, go to scotttaylor.us. That's scotttaylor.us. Congressman, thanks for being with us.